Hey everybody, Brian Mittman here with AyudaMeLegal.com. We're happy today to present you some very important information about issues going on in the world of immigration. I have my co-host, Marc Karlin of Karlin and AyudaMeLegal, as well as our friend Brad Glassman of Glassman Law in New York City. And today we're going to be talking about some very newsworthy and important information regarding when, unfortunately, bad actors, that is, bad lawyers, do the wrong thing for the most vulnerable, people who don't speak English very well and are looking to get either their green card or citizenship. So I'm excited to bring this topic forward, and why don't I leave it to you, Marc?
Thank you, Brian. Brad, you and I both have practiced immigration for a long time. And last week, you brought to my attention that you've been approached by several people who recently found out they may have actually filed fraudulent immigration applications. Can you explain what you've encountered in the last week or so?
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys. It came to my attention about 4 months ago when a new client came and showed me an application that made no sense to me. I read it and said, there's something wrong here. It seems fraudulent. Since then, a NBC News report came out. A gentleman was deported from the United States. And when reviewed, it turns out that underlying case that got him deported was fraudulent from an attorney that filed it for him.
Can you explain, maybe in a little more detail, what was allegedly fraudulent about the application that was presented to you by this family of the gentleman who was deported?
Absolutely. Subsequent to that story, I've had well over 100 inquiries, in-person interviews, and so forth regarding the same matter. It seems that the basic premise was a Violence Against Women Act. It's a federal statute, VAWA, was utilized in order to perpetrate an effort to circumvent the immigration law.
Let me ask you there, Brad. Let me, so we can clarify for people who don't know what a VAWA is. Could you briefly explain what a VAWA, and that's VAWA, application is?
Absolutely. A VAWA provides protection to those that may have been abused physically, mentally, socially, or psychologically by a U.S. citizen, husband, wife, or child. So when that application's filed, it enables someone to apply for a green card as protection from that abuser.
And generally, a VAWA is an excellent application for those who are undocumented and have been the victims of domestic violence by a U.S. citizen. Again, a spouse or a child. Isn't that correct?
Correct. It's a serious offense, and it's very protective for immigrants. From my understanding, 70% or so are approved, but that's based on real facts.
Right. And if you have a legitimate VAWA application, you don't have to be in the country with documentation, as I understand it, to apply for VAWA.
Right. Most people are in the country with documentation. Doesn't have to be physical abuse, police reports, and so forth. It can just be statements. Occasionally, if you are out of the country, yes, you can obtain VAWA protection too.
Okay. So what did you see when you reviewed and started reviewing these VAWA applications that came to your attention?
Sure. The VAWA applications individually all alleged a U.S. citizen child had abused a parent. Therefore, it enabled the applicant who self-petitions to obtain work authorization, Social Security card, and travel permission to leave the country and come back, which you otherwise would not have if you had been an undocumented non-citizen for 20, 30 years.
And was it true that the U.S. citizen, say the child, had physically or emotionally abused his or her non-citizen parent?
I've reviewed over 100 cases. I've looked people in the eyes. They cry when they find out that their children are allegedly abusing them, and to a person says, there's no way this happened.
Did the people you've spoken to, did they realize what they were signing before these applications were submitted to the government?
In my opinion, absolutely not. Often there were just blank pages given them to sign, and promises, of course, from attorneys, and basically statements saying that they are telling the truth, which is on every application. So they signed a blank document, seemingly, that says, I swear this is true, but didn't have the substance of what the document held.
Did these folks know? Let me ask you another way. What were they told they were signing, if anything?
Sure. I understand they were told their kids were sponsoring them. Their citizen kids are over 21 now, and they could actually sponsor them.
So in their mind, there was never a knowledge, or let me say it another way. So the people that you've spoken to, so they had no idea that they were making claims that their U.S. citizen children were physically or emotionally abusing them.
Absolutely not. The only way it came through was through the the NBC News report and review of files and subsequent immigration decisions that I've reviewed, which clearly state there was an abuse of the system and the VAWA was frivolous.
I understand that there's a certain attorney who a lot of your new clients or the people you've consulted with have used. Is that attorney still practicing, to your knowledge?
As far as I know, he's still practicing. People have explained to me that there's still lines out the door at the offices and still accepting clients, from my understanding.
The immigrant community is very vulnerable. And, most people look for any way they can to remain in the United States and get the proper documentation. Are there any kind of waivers or any kind of relief available to the people you've spoken to recently that signed false VAWA documents?
There are some possible waivers available on willful misrepresentation. Still looking at each case on a case-by-case basis, but most likely, in my opinion, these waivers may not be applicable. Now the immigration is aware of applications pending. To me, they're flagging them, it looks like, and now people who have stayed out of the system for so long are now technically in the system and known.
So your understanding is that USCIS, the Immigration Service, is flagging VAWA applications from a certain attorney?
It seems that way to me based on denials that I'm seeing.
Let's talk about some steps that somebody can take to ensure or that they're not filing a fraudulent or a frivolous application. What are some of your recommendations so that this doesn't happen to people in the future?
Read everything that you sign. Don't sign blank pages. And of course, if English isn't your first language, have someone explain to you exactly what you're signing. And if the attorney isn't forthright explaining him or herself what you're signing, they're not the attorney for you.
You and I practice immigration, as I said at the beginning, a long time. And over the years, the immigration applications have gotten longer and longer. But you and I think, both emphasize that it's so important that if you're signing something, you have to read it thoroughly. And if it's not in a language you understand, you must insist that your attorney or whoever else is preparing the application for you literally translate the entire document before you sign it. Wouldn't you agree? That's great advice.
Absolutely. Any hesitation, bring a family member or a friend that speaks your native language as well. So there's no loss in the translation.
We at this office assist a lot of people who speak Spanish and don't speak English well. That's why many of our staff members, our team members, are bilingual English and Spanish. So I can tell you, in our office, we spend a great part of each application process translating documents for our clients. And I think that's important, Brad, because when you file an application, immigration application in English with USCIS, USCIS is going to assume that the person signing the document read it and agreed with everything stated in it. So this is something we always caution our clients not to sign anything. Because one, it's the right thing to do, not to sign it until they understand it and have read it, but to caution them that they have to agree with everything that's set forth in an application, because somewhere down the line, USCIS will ask them about it.
Absolutely. And in some of the denials I'm reading, specifically the cases are denied for fraud and frivolous filings, and the immigration is pointing out that you signed this document they'll read exactly the solemn swear to tell the truth and say, basically, you signed it, you have to own it now.
Right. So, many people come to us like you who've gone to other attorneys or other document preparers with applications that are not correct, in some case claim serious misrepresentations. And I have to tell them, if you filed it with the USCIS, we will try to explain it away, but it's not an excuse to USCIS that you relied on an attorney to prepare the application for you. If you signed it, you are still responsible for it, the contents of the application.
Absolutely. And if I might add, we both see this all the time. People are vulnerable in the communities. They've never had an opportunity to obtain green cards or so forth, or legalized,
right?
And they're full of hope. So
Right.
between the vulnerability in the community and the hope that they have, it's a very dangerous precedent, and people can really be taken advantage of.
Yeah, and most people, if someone has a law license, they trust that this person is knowledgeable, that this person is telling the truth, and because they're a licensed professional, they must be legitimate. But of course, we've seen that's not always the case.
That's spot on. To a person I've spoken with, they've said, but why would an attorney do this to me? They're an attorney. I trust them.
I think the bottom line is, like a lot of things in life, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, but also to thoroughly review everything and never, ever sign anything without either reading it or having it read to you by someone you trust.
Spot
and that
on.
is such good advice, regardless of what type of law you're getting involved in, whether it's immigration, accidents, or anything. Is you're an adult, and you need to make sure that you understand what you're signing. One of the things that we'll do is we'll link to that news article, the video where actually Brad, his pretty face got to appear. But it's a really, really shocking story. And just to be very clear for everybody that's listening, it's, a couple who had been here, 20 plus years,
I think 25 years. 25
born in the
years.
United States, raised in the United States. They were advised by this particular attorney, not only could they file these applications, they could leave and come back. And upon coming back, the father was deported. And it's absolutely heartbreaking, because these are people's lives that we're dealing with. This is not, scamming somebody a few bucks for selling them a Subway sandwich that was too short or something. This
Right.
is real world impact.
And I can tell you, Brian, and this, I'm sure Brad will agree, in our practice, there are times when one of our clients has to leave the country to either complete an application or for some other reason. And we really, do everything in our power to make sure that everything is together. All I's are dotted, all T's are crossed. Everything's good before we say to this person, yes, it's okay to leave the U.S. Because if you're not a citizen, there's never 100% guarantee that you might get back in the U.S. So we only recommend and have clients leave the country when we sure that everything is legitimate, above board, and there'll be no issues that this person will encounter when they try to come back in the U.S.
That is
Absolutely.
great advice. And Brad, thank you for joining us today. And Marc, always super interesting. And again, if there are any legal issues that anybody listening has, please reach out to us. We have an extensive network in all areas of legal issues, and obviously a specialty in immigration, workers' compensation, disability, and injury accidents.
And I think to remind everybody, Brian, is that we can assist people in all 50 states, even though we're licensed in certain states. Immigration is a federal practice. We can practice in all 50 states.
And if I might add, gentlemen, the saddest part of schemes like this, as Brian mentioned, are the effects on families. It's tearing them apart. And we have tissues in my office, people crying, my staff crying, hearing about the heartache. People have been here 20, 30, 40 years, raised wonderful children, and now their families are torn apart.
Well, thank you for the great work you're doing, Brad. And if anybody has any questions, please reach out to us and check out our contact information.